You know, niggas gotta get their priorities together. Got their mind on the wrong things, spending their money in the wrong way.
Trapaholics, real trap shit.
Say you need that car with the rims and a charm, just like Jim. It's more than life. Yeah.
I'm telling you. Talk to him.
Say you need that LV bag
For what?
with the belt and the hat.
That's all you got though.
It's more than life. Yeah.
Talk to him. Real.
Say you wanna turn up at the club,
Why?
buy some bottles, impress them girls.
what?
It's more than life.
Oh, fucking everybody.
Yeah.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast and Food At. And I'm Ethan, and it's been a while since I've been on here. Had some technical difficulties with needing a new charger for my laptop and needing a new battery, but we're all set now. We got some decent ones, I think, off of Amazon, so we're all ready to roll now. But it's that time, just one day away, less than probably 24 hours. The NFL draft is going to be here, and I know I haven't really posted much stuff about the NFL draft or did any like mock drafts and stuff. I know a lot of people love doing those kind of things. I used to be real ingrained into the draft and mock drafts and top 100 big boards and watching film, not highlights of player, but actual game film of them. But I really just haven't. I don't know. For some reason, I haven't been overly motivated to watch to do all that anymore. But I still follow like the news headlines and the things like that. I understand that the Saints like to trade, mostly like to trade up. So there's news swirling about that. There's news swirling about certain players that they maybe are really interested in too. But lots of times that can just be trying to fool other people, you know. That can be just like a smokescreen lots of times. But anyways, I got a couple topics here that aren't directly. They're not any mock drafts or any of my real feelings on any of these players. But I got a couple of headlines that I want to talk about and give my opinion on. So, anyways, can I get a menu? And the first one is this happened. This happened several days ago. Like I said, I'm getting to this stuff a little late, but this happened like 2 days ago, I guess, on Monday. And this is a player that I've heard a lot about, and that's Elijah Cansey. Like I've heard a lot about him. That's one of the first few names that I started recognizing, and that's the defensive tackle from Pittsburgh and out of Pittsburgh College. And the main reason I've heard so much swirling about him and news about him is because of like the size comparison to Aaron Donald. A lot of people think that maybe he has that kind of potential, and it's it probably helps this case a little bit as well, being that undersized defensive tackle that he also played at the same college as Aaron Donald, so that makes kind of an interesting follow on his where he is going to go and if he's a good pick for the Saints. But I think in a lot of big boards, top 100 big boards, he's maybe like the second or third defensive tackle behind like Jalen Carter and Breesy. So it would be interesting to see if the Saints would take him at 29 if they value him as a first round pick. But I guess Pauline, let's see here. Pauline, uh, uh, a scout or someone that was doing some work on him, wanted to. Well, I guess he found like a mention of him, and he had like a comment about him. But this is Pauline's, I guess, comment about him, and it kind of involves the Saints as possibly a team that may be really interested in him. I've never been high on Cansey, he says, as most, and I don't think he's a great first round project. So would the Saints take him as late first? Maybe. And like I've said, it's the size really. At 6'1", 281 pounds, lack of growth potential and short arms. And I think that may be the thing that kills him the most is the fact that he doesn't have at least 32-inch arms. And a lot of people don't realize that an inch and a half is a lot, because if it say, I know it's not two-hand touch, but if it was two-hand touch, it's like the 30-inch arms can just barely reach me while trying to get around an offensive tackle. But someone with 32-inch arms, they're up against you, So people try to think that 1 or 2 inches isn't a lot, but it is, it could be the difference between sack and no sack. And the Saints have a big, long history of almost sacks, with David Onyemata and Marcus Davenport was maybe the king of the almost sack. And he goes on to say that the arms worry him, despite my opinion, everything I've been told in recent days points to Cansey being a lock at first round as a first round pick. Who would select him in the first round? If I was a betting man, I'd go with the New Orleans Saints. So he mentions the Saints as the premier franchise that's in that race. The franchise has been digging deep into Cansey and burning the phone lines, talking with coaches at Pittsburgh recently to get more detail on the possible on the defensive tackle. So it even says that the Saints are burning up other GMs' phone lines and coaches' phone lines of whether that means to trade up or if they believe he's going to be at that pick. But I wouldn't be mad at the pick if the Saints picked him because it is a position of need. But you guess you just have to wait and see how the board falls, when they're on the clock, because will he be far and away the BPA best player available? It's hard to say because they also mention things about how the Saints have kind of a profile for defensive linemen because they usually want their defensive linemen to be 6'4", 6'6", 290 plus pounds, and he's just not that. He doesn't fit that profile at all. Maybe things have changed a little bit now that Sean Payton isn't the head coach, but Dennis Allen is still the defensive he's not the defensive coordinator, but he was the defensive coordinator, and he's a defensive minded head coach. So I wouldn't see why his profile would change just now that there's a different head coach. But I think I just have to wait and see how the board falls to whether I'd be mad or not. But I definitely wouldn't if he's considered the best player available and you're getting him where you picked that already. If they don't have to trade up or anything like that, and Reese and Jalen Carter and all those guys are gone already. But just looking at his stats, a lot of times college doesn't matter too much, and sometimes it really is important. But you see it all the time where a guy dominated in college, but is not very impressive at the NFL level, and then the same thing, players are almost unnoticed while in college, but then they get to NFL and some kind of light switch comes on. But anyways, he was a 3-year player at Pitt, and his freshman year he played in 10 games, had 12 solo tackles, 15 assists, 27 total, and 7 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. And then also had 2 pass deflections. And then in his sophomore season, he played in 12 games, had 23 solo sacks or solo tackles, 10 assists, and 33 total, with 13 tackles for loss and 7 sacks, and and 1 pass deflection, 1 forced fumble. But I mean that's what you really are looking at here with Cansey, and hopefully it can project into the NFL as the 13 tackles for loss, the 7 sacks. That's really what the Saints need on their defensive line, is some interior push, interior pass rush, because all the guys they have now you could maybe more look at as just a one gap nose tackle, more run stoppers than actual pass rushers. So getting someone that could really help at that 3 technique spot would be really, really helpful. And then in his says senior here, he didn't play in 2020 and just went on to his senior year where he played in 11 games with 17 solo, 14 assists, 31 total, with 14.5 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks. So each year, while in college at least, he got better each year. So you hear comments about how he may not have any growth potential or a high ceiling just because he has short arms. I mean, that's definitely not the main thing you're looking for in a defensive lineman, but it probably is definitely still highlighted. But it'll be interesting to see how that works out, and if they end up trading up or anything like that. But on to the next subject here, and this one, I guess, stirred up some controversy in Saints media, Saints Twitter, just from a comment from Sean Payton, I guess, just about how things are different, I guess, kind of shiny and new in Denver, and how the processes are seems easier, I guess, the process to finding talent while in Denver compared to New Orleans. But here's his statement. Basically, like I said, it's like a new facility to him. He's like the new kid in school while walking through the facilities. But anyways, I'm like a driver of a new car that still hasn't figured out how to get the seat warmers on. It's pretty impressive. It's new for me in a good way. I'm talking about the efficiency of the process. We weren't as far ahead in New Orleans when we were looking at some of these players as to being able to pick up and access the information as quickly. Most of the time when things like this come out, similar to the Adam Pac-Man Jones thing, and when people, I don't know if you want to call this bashing the Saints, definitely what Adam Pac-Man Jones was doing was really bashing the Saints, which lots of times this kind of stuff just rolls off my back, and I think it's kind of funny. But it seems like a little bit of a slight, especially, once again, kind of like Pauline in the article about Cansey. He calls the Saints out by name, talking about in New Orleans. And I guess when it comes down to it, when he was drafting players here, I mean, he still was right up there with Mickey Loomis and having the final say on some of these players. So I don't think that should make him completely unresponsible for any poor draft picks while in New Orleans. I think that was kind of a similar trend a lot of times in some of these drafts where we don't think the Saints got good players, is that they really were keyed in on one player, and a lot of times they would be keyed in on that one player, and then when their turn would come around, the player, pretty much the one and only player that they wanted would be gone, and then they'd be scrambling to pick someone else. And a lot of times that wouldn't turn out well for them. Or similar things like the Marcus Davenport trading up, or even just last year with a trade with the Eagles for 2 first-round picks. They found out that the value that they gave to trade away what maybe isn't as good as they expected it to be. But this is just a kind of an odd statement. I don't know if it's a direct shot at New Orleans. I don't think that's really what it is, because I don't even understand the efficiency of the process that has me thinking that the Saints were still doing stuff like they were doing when they were drafting players like in the late 80s, 90s or something. So I'm just kind of confused. I wonder if I would have liked to hear more of a better explanation about maybe it's how they are able to meet with more players, draft prospects, or they have better technology like better computers or laptops to save information, or what the difference is with the Saints. Like, are they still filing everything with paper and using fax machines? It's just, I don't know. But maybe Sean Payton's just kind of trying to wipe his hands clean and give the Broncos a compliment at the same time when talking about the Saints and any bad draft picks that project on him. Probably the one that haunts him the most is the Marcus Davenport trade. But that's all over with now. The Saints need to wipe their hands clean of it too, because he's not on this team anymore, and they have first-round picks in the next 2 drafts. All right. So I hadn't done a podcast about the draft or anything like that, so we're getting it in with some subjects today. And this last one here is Mickey Loomis. Sounds like a lot of things probably aren't going to change from the recent history of the Saints with their trades, but he had a pre-draft press conference, and he basically just talked about how he thinks that there's good depth in this draft, and how many picks they have and odds of trading up. I guess he was asked that question, and he said, right now we have 8 picks as of 3:10 p.m. Right now we have 8 picks, and just talking about how he loves to get on the phone lines and burn that oil, trying to see if any team wants to move down or if they want to pick where they're at, and talking about the best player available, and just the Saints, if nothing else, during the drafting period, or it feels like just off season in general, are a fun team to watch. So I 29, that just seems kind of low for the Saints to be picking in the first round. So I wouldn't be surprised if they moved up to like 25 or 20 or something. We just have to see how the board's falling. I mean, that's what it comes down to, no matter what, is how that board's falling, and how they're going to go about this draft. This will be I guess the second one, actually, since Sean Payton isn't here. So I'm excited to see how this goes, and maybe a better player than they expect will fall. But he was also asked some other questions as well. He was asked about Cesar Ruiz's picking up that 5th-year option, which would be expensive at more than 14.7 million, but he wouldn't really elaborate on what their decision would be. But I think it would be probably in their best interest to re-signed him to a lower deal, lowers his cap hit. And I would be surprised if they didn't re-sign Ruiz or pick up his 5th-year option, because he it seemed like it clicked for him in his 3rd year. And I'm a big advocate of, no matter how the player's been or what he's shown so far, if they're a top four rounds, in the top 4 rounds they're picked in that round, I feel as if you got to give them at least 3 years to develop. And he finally clicked and looked like their best offensive line a lot of the time last year. And then he was just also, of course, asked the common question, the popular question about whether what they expect to do about Alvin Kamara maybe missing the start of training camp due to court, and what their thoughts are on his suspension. But he just kind of disregarded it as not that big of a deal, really, just a short-term, temporary thing to overcome. So, a lot of GM talk. I feel like a lot of time during that press conference, he kind of had a smile on his face, like a Cheshire cat, about what they plan to do. He likes to be able to keep things from the fans for his own enjoyment. I think a lot of these coaches and GMs kind of like messing with the fan base a little bit. So he wasn't giving too much insight of what they plan to do, their future plans for a couple things like the draft and picking up some players, contracts, and how their legal teams and terms and dates might turn out. But anyways, I'm just ready for the draft. I'm ready for it to be here. There's so many hundreds of mock drafts and hundreds of big boards showing the rankings of players. There's a few names that are familiar for me. That's really the last thing I'm going to do, is just try to look at these big boards and some of these mock drafts, just so some of these players that I've never heard of before or anything like that are familiar. It's nice to at least know like almost every player that's taken in the first round. But I think that's all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?